Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. In today's tutorial, we're going to do a reverse ombre hot chocolate gingerbread themed tumbler, and I'm so excited to show you guys how I'm going to put this together. So these are all the products that we're using, as well as a few other supplies, which of course I will link down in the description box, as well as any discount codes to save you a bit of money. But let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we're going to be doing, of course, is prepping our tumbler. So this is a 14-ounce handled mug that I got from Michaels. You can use any mug that you want. I decided that I was going to make one with a handle because this is actually a design that I've already created. If you've been following me on Instagram, I have created a 20-ounce version of this. And so I decided that I wanted to see how it would look on a handled style. So we're going to get this prepped, of course, just sanding your cup, and then cleaning that off with either dish soap and water or your 91% rubbing alcohol. And then we're going to take this over to spray paint. So I know a lot of people have seen this reverse ombre all over the tumbler world, and please know that I am not the original creator of this design, but I do love how this design and idea has kind of blown up, and I have been definitely taking this and running with it. So the way that I do these is I do my ombre first. So I'm going to start with the two colors that I'm going to be doing an ombre with, and we're going to spray paint the cup like I normally would to do an ombre. And then we're going to go ahead and glitter this. Some people will choose to do all of their striping first and literally do the entire process start to finish of doing the reverse ombre with just your painter's tape. I feel like for me, this is a bit easier. And it really just helps me ensure that I don't end up with a bunch of cross-contamination of my glitter getting into different areas than it's supposed to. It also prevents me having issues with painter's tape possibly pulling up your paint layers. So for me, this is the easiest. Now, if I was just going to do a solid paint reverse ombre, I probably wouldn't, epoxy in between. I would just, wait for my cup to thoroughly dry, then move my striping tape over so I could do the second ombre portion in the opposite look, but really whatever kind of works for you. So I've gone ahead and I've applied a little bit of my epoxy to my cup, less than 5 ml, and I've spread that all over my tumbler except for the handle. And we're going to go ahead and get this glittered. So the first glitter we're using here is Vintage from Peachy Olive Glitter. It's a beautiful deep copper color, and it just really goes really well with the gingerbread coloring and theme of the UV DTF we're going to be using. The next color we're going in with is Paris from Batty Glitter. That will be linked down in the description box here. So we've got our basic ombre done here, as you can see. And this is sort of the starting process for me when I'm doing these with glitter. So after I am done with the bulk of the cup, we'll say, I decided to do my handle last because I wasn't quite sure what color I wanted the handle to be completely honest. So I decided I was going to go in and paint it pink. And then we're going to go over this with the Paris glitter color. You are going to see that I end up changing this at the end of the tutorial for reasons that sort of just come up and happen, and this happens sort of in your process of creating beautiful creations, and sometimes you just have to pivot. So I did start with just painting that handle, and we're going to add the glitter so we have a nice pretty and pink glittered handle. And then we'll set this to dry. So this is going to take a couple hours to dry because we are using epoxy method for most of the cup. So a couple hours to thoroughly dry. Then I can brush the cup off and spray seal it and then get it on the turner for a couple coats of epoxy until it's smooth. While we're waiting for our cup to be done with the epoxying process, we're going to take our 3D sculpted items. These are from Sculptistry. This is a topper lid so that you can do removable toppers, and then little gingerbread person that we're going to be using on our lid. So we're going to go ahead and paint these. I'm just mixing a few browns together to get sort of what I envision the perfect chocolate brown to be. And so this is a little bit of trial and error. I will list the paints that I used, of course, down in the description box, but please note that everybody's, perfect chocolate color is to their own discretion and decision. So do not feel like this is the only way to do it. Plus, you might have different paints in your craft supply bin, and so you might have other things to use. So I was having a difficult time coming up with a gingerbread color, so I did have to break out the good old Arteza paints, which I've had for quite a while. So I took a couple of the goldy brown ones that I had in my stash. We're using a bit of white, we're going to go in and use like this just plain acrylic brown a little bit to darken this just a little bit. I wanted like that perfect golden brown cookie color, and it took definitely quite a bit of mixing my mixologist ways of painting to be able to come with like that perfect color. So finally we've nailed it after kind of going back and forth with all of the browns and the goldy colors to be able to get this perfect gingerbread color. And now we're going to spend the time painting our gingerbread. So I am going to do 2 coats on both the topper lid and then of course the gingerbread person to ensure that I get full coverage all over this entire 3D sculpted piece. You could take these of course to your spray tent or take them outside and spray paint them. You don't have to use acrylic paint. I just figured I would use acrylic paint because it probably would give me the closest to the color that I wanted for both of these items, but whatever works best for you. So we are back to our tumbler, and now we have a very smooth cup to work with. We're going to go ahead and do most of our sanding at this point and make sure that we have, you know, nothing sticking up as far as sharp bits of glitter, making sure that our handle is nice and smooth, and really making sure that that rim has a really fine line of stainless steel exposed so that we have something for our final coats of epoxy to adhere to. Now we're going to go ahead and add what is officially going to be our reverse ombre. Wow, this is definitely going to get me tongue-tied throughout this tutorial, so bear with me here. So the way that I'm doing this is I'm taking my 1-inch painter's tape and I'm laying that first strip down, then taking sort of a spacer tape and then placing the second tape down, and I'm going to do this all the way around the cup. Now you may run into what I ran into was that my 1-inch painter's tape does not fit evenly all the way across and around the cup, so I did have to kind of backtrack and move each of my long strips of tape over just a little bit so that all of the stripes look to be as even as possible, which happens sometimes, you know, when you're doing these sort of striping with just tape versus taking, you know, using a template from Cricut or something. So we're going to go ahead and take this back to the spray paint. I did end up taping off my handle as well, just because I wanted to keep that pink. I had decided at this point in time, but now we're going to do exactly what we did the first time, except for we're reversing the color. So the brown is going to be over what the pink glitter is covering, and the pink is going to be over where the brown glitter is covering and exposed, okay? So this is going to give us that reverse ombre look without having to, you know, paint each stripe or strip individually in the beginning of the process, okay? So after that has dried, all of my paint's dry here, I'm going to go in with Mod Podge this time. And I'm going to go ahead and get this covered, and we're going to get this glittered again. Okay, so same process here. We're doing an ombre, following the colors that are currently exposed. So I'm starting with my vintage, but we're doing the top portion of the cup over that brown spray paint. Then once we've gotten the vintage color on there, we will go ahead and go in with Paris, which is going to be over the pink on the bottom here, okay? So you kind of just have to like remind yourself like what you're doing and what the end goal is supposed to look like, because this could be something that if you haven't done a lot of these can be a little bit like almost kind of confusing, kind of like a, you know, a little bit of a mind trick, if you will, to like figure out how to accomplish this. But I promise it's easier than it sort of seems in the way that I'm explaining it. I will also link the original creator of the reverse ombre down in the description box, her original video, so you can go check that out as well. Once I have glittered this second glitter session we have here, we're going to immediately remove our pieces of tape here to make sure that, of course, our tape doesn't end up being completely adhered to this cup. But here is how now you can see sort of that beautiful double ombre sort of look throughout the cup, okay? So after I've removed the tape, I will also remove the tape off of the handle. Same process we did before. We're going to let this dry. I'll brush it off. We'll spray seal it. And then we're going to get this on the turner for another couple coats of epoxy, okay? So another 2 coats of epoxy, pretty thin layers here. We really just want this cup to be nice and smooth so that we can go into adding our decals and sort of our final pieces of this cup all together, okay? So after we are finished with this, we're going to let this spin and we're going to let this cure, of course. And then after that is done and it's smooth, we can go back in with our final sanding. We do want to make sure we sand because we did paint over that rim once again. So we want to make sure we go back and expose that stainless steel fine line at the top. And of course, anything that might be a bit rough anywhere on the cup, we're going to take the time now to really make sure we have all of that sanded down and it's nice and smooth. So at this point is when I realized that my handle did not get very good coverage in my original coat of glitter and that I could see a little bit of the actual stainless steel of the cup. So I decided that I was going to change tactics here, and we're going to tape off the handle so that we can spray paint it. So I ended up taking it to the spray tent after I covered the cup and left just the handle exposed, and we're going to spray paint it just with that candy pink color from Rustoleum for the handle. So it's going to be a solid pink handle, no glitter, and that was just because I didn't really love the look with the glitter with some of that stainless steel still exposed. So now we are back and we're on to our decals, okay? So the first thing we're going to do is add our main decal. So I got this Santa's Hot Chocolate decal PNG from Etsy, from Scarlo Digital Designs. I will link her shop down in the description box. She has the cutest PNGs and cutest SVGs and things, so definitely be sure to check her shop out on Etsy. And so I ended up using Tech Wrap Crafts sticker paper, just print and cut there. And I want to say that these decals are about 3.5 inches wide. And then I just did, print and then cut, just like you normally would for anything. Cricut was cooperating with me, so thankfully I didn't have to hand cut any of these. So now we're going to go back, and I did cut apart the 16-ounce wrap that had the gingerbread and pink candy canes with the snowflakes. And so this is carried in my shop, this wrap here. And so now we're going to take just a few of the gingerbread, because keep in mind, this is not a very big mug. So I knew that I wasn't going to need all of that wrap. So I just took a few of those sections, at least 2 of the gingerbread people, and we're going to use those throughout the cup. So I'm trying to keep all of the pink items. So like the snowflakes in pink, the candy canes that are pink, the little hearts that also are part of this wrap. And we're trying to layer those in the areas that are over the brown glitter. That way we really can make sure that those stand out really nicely. And then we're really placing the gingerbread, for the most part, over or across the pink sections, because those will stand out very much on its own. It's just a little bit harder for the pink sections to really, pop on top of that pink glitter. So I'm trying to be very pointed and ensure that I'm putting those specifically over that vintage colored glitter. So we're going to finish applying all of our UV DTF pieces here until I seem satisfied. And then we're going to get into the next part of this. So I really am loving how this cup is continuing to evolve. As I mentioned, I did make a larger version of this cup, but I will say both the drip and the topper that we added to this is something that I didn't do with the original, but I am planning to go back and add that to the original cup and design. So now we're back to our topper pieces. While we are just letting that sit for a bit, we're going to go ahead and just paint over all of the pieces on the gingerbread person's body with just a pink Posca pen. You could go in with acrylic paint, whatever you have on hand. And I'm just going to paint them pink because I want it to very much match the aesthetic of the rest of the cup here. So once I have this ready to go, we're not going to do anything else with the gingerbread person here. We're going to get ready to mix our epoxy so that we can get our drip together. Okay, so I am taking equal parts of Flint Sister Supply Shop Fast Cure. I know, I'm pretty brave for doing this with Fast Cure because I will be honest, I have failed multiple times doing a drip using Fast Set because typically it flash cures on me, or it ends up, getting too thick too quickly and I don't have enough working time. But this time I really sat and babysat it. So we're doing equal parts and we're mixing this thoroughly. So at least 5 minutes, we're going to mix our epoxy until it is completely mixed. And then we'll go in and add our color. So of course we're looking for like that deep, rich hot chocolate color here. And I'm adding the brown acrylic paint and sort of like this darker umber color from Folk Art Paint to give us this sort of rich chocolatey looking color here. Now, normally I use Artist Cure when I'm going to be doing a drip, and the amount of time that it takes can vary for your epoxy to thicken, but typically my rule of thumb is I check every 10 minutes, but it takes anywhere from 45 minutes to 50 minutes for it to be to the thickness that I prefer and like. Now you can use additives or things to make your epoxy thicken quicker, like an epoxy thickener, which I will link the one that I use down in the description box, or you can use something really easy to find in your cabinets, which is cornstarch, and that also will help you thicken up your epoxy quicker, okay? I'm not going to use any of those for this, but I do always like to mention those when I'm doing drips because some people just don't have the time to sit here and wait, or they're impatient like me and they just want to hurry up and get the project done. So while we're waiting for our epoxy to thicken, I am going to go ahead and secure the gingerbread person onto our lid topper there. And we're just going to continue to wait for this to thicken up. So again, this only took about 25-ish minutes, not even probably. It probably took like 15 to 20 minutes, I would say, for it to be like thick enough for me to feel good about. And you're going to want to choose, of course, what your likeness is as far as thickness. I wanted it to be that I could easily sort of swirl it around that popsicle stick, and that if I held the popsicle stick with the epoxy on it and was attempting to make it drip back into the cup, that it was sort of a slower drip. Not super slow that, you know, like molasses slow, but more like honey slow, if that makes sense. So think about, I guess, that consistency and that thickness. So we went to the lid topper first, and we just added sort of like a bath of that chocolate epoxy onto that lid there. I didn't want any of it to drip off the sides because, again, this is going to sit on top of the topper. And then we're going to go back to the actual cup here, and I'm going to make a really thick line of that thickened epoxy up at the top rim. And then we're just going to let gravity do its job. We're going to let gravity do what gravity does, and we're going to let that pull that epoxy in a very slow process down the cup. Now, because this is a shorter cup, I am being mindful about how much epoxy I am putting around the lid or around the rim here, because I don't want this to drip too far down. Now, if I was working with a taller cup, like a 30 ounce, I probably would really add a pretty thick layer here, probably like half an inch or so of thickened epoxy at the top to let that drip down farther. But I really am trying to be conservative up top on this mug because, again, this is not a super long or tall mug, and so I don't want the drip to overtake the entire design. So we're going to continue to play with this until we're satisfied. I did use just about the entire 30 mLs between these two pieces and the second lid for the original design of this cup, but we're going to leave this to be. I'm going to put it on my turner to spin so that it doesn't drip any farther than I need it to, and we're going to let that cure until it's completely hardened. While we're waiting for that to cure, I then decided that I wanted to add marshmallows, of course, to my hot chocolate topper, because how could I not have marshmallows on my topper? So I am taking some sculpted clay that I had on hand. I already had a piece that had already been like conditioned and worked. And so I took a small section of that, and I am just going to rub that in my hands until it's nice and warm, which is going to make it a bit more malleable. And then we're going to make what the equivalent of making a snake, right? We all can kind of make snakes with clay, right? And then I cut that down and sort of made that rounded cylinder section with those flattened tops. So kind of like rolling a booger, I guess, is probably the easiest thing I could like say when it comes to making your marshmallows. I did these in two sizes, so I made sort of mini marshmallows for my smaller mug, and then I did end up using a larger piece, a more thicker section, to make some larger marshmallows for the other topper for the original cup and design. So after I have shaped my marshmallow boogers here, we're gonna go ahead and get these in the oven. So this is oven baked clay. You are going to make sure that you bake it. You can paint it before bake it. It's completely up to you. But I ended up putting this in the oven at 275 for 15 minutes. And then now they're nice and hard, and we can go into painting them. Now, again, you can paint them before if you choose to. I typically will bake my clay first and then come back and paint them. So now we're going to go ahead and get out our white acrylic paint, and we're going to take the time here to paint these. Now this is going to take multiple coats of paint, and you're going to be a mess before the end of your painting session is over. You could also spray paint those, but of course making sure you're getting all sides of that cylinder, of course, to ensure that they are fully covered before you move on to the next steps. So our marshmallows are all painted. They look great, and so now we're going to adhere the smaller marshmallows to the topper that we're using for today's design. So just a little bit of UV resin goes a long way. I ended up starting with like putting them on there individually, and then I was like, I'm making this way too hard for myself. So I ended up just like putting dots and sections around where I want all of my small marshmallows to go and sit, and then I just placed them, of course, around that lid. I really love the look of like a topper that has this topper having a lot of marshmallows, because I remember being a kid and literally the more marshmallows, the better. Like you couldn't tell me that there was too many marshmallows because there was no such thing in my eyes. So that's what I had envisioned when creating this topper. So then we're going to go ahead and cure it after all of our marshmallows are applied. And then we get to apply this directly to our topper. So the way that these lid pieces are built is there are sort of divots on the bottom edge of these that you're going to see when I turn it over, where you can nestle your magnets, okay? So I have really small magnets that I bought from Amazon forever ago, and we're going to use those. These are pretty strong magnets, and I used them in my epoxy magnet tutorial I did forever ago. But we're going to go ahead and fill up those like divots with a little bit of the UV resin. I'm stacking 2 magnets on top of each other and setting them in those divots with the UV resin. Then I'll cure this. And then I'm going to do the same process again with the other 2 sections. So I went across from one another because I didn't want them to be too close to one another and the magnets gravitate to one another, because that does tend to happen sometimes. So I try and only do 2 sections at a time to make sure that they don't pull towards each other and pull themselves directly out of the UV resin. So we're going to do the same process with the last 2 magnets. Again, I'm using 2 stacked, but the UV resin is really only going to cover that bottom one. But that's going to make it so that it's easier for us to attach this to the cup. So because we already have the 2 magnets stacked, now I can go ahead and put just a little bit of UV resin over the bottom of that top magnet that's exposed. And we can then use that to put the perfect, marks on top of our actual lid so that it is secure and it is in the direction we need it to be, that it's going to be nice and straight and not us having to guess, and measure where exactly each of those dots need to go for our UV resin. So once we've cured that, that's the last thing that we have to do there. So this is really completely done. Now, of course, I will tell you that this does need 2 final coats of epoxy here. I have not yet done that process here. And for the lid, many people ask, how do I finish off my lids? Same process, same thing. I'll go ahead and just mix a little bit of epoxy, use a paintbrush, and I'll go ahead and just brush that entire top lid section off of the actual lid, of course. But then that will be done and it'll be a final look just like the rest of the cup. So here's the final look at the cup. This came out adorable, so absolutely cute. It really makes me want some hot chocolate right now because it is pretty cold. But I do hope that you guys did enjoy today's video. Of course, if you loved today's tutorial, be sure to check out other videos on my channel and come back next week because I do upload videos every week. So be sure to stay tuned for my next tutorial. I can't wait to see you. If you have any questions, of course, leave those down in the comment section down below. I love responding and answering you guys' questions, but thank you so much for watching today's tutorial and I'll see you guys in the next one.